So for those that are not familiar, there's Kyogre and Groudon, these two legendary Pokemon, and they have this battle over the weather of whether or not there's going to be a drought or like a monsoon, I guess. The monsoon powers up water type moves and weakens fire, and the drought powers up fire moves, which makes no sense because Groudon isn't even a fire type. But anyway, I wondered, instead of there being this savage battle between the two legendaries, what would happen if the Hoenn region just sat down and had a civil democratic election to determine their fate and the weather that would probably eventually disrupt the ecosystem and kill them all. So here's how I think that vote might go down. So here's the ground rules for the election. First of all, we're using the Gen 3 Hoenn Dex. There's 202 Pokemon, so you need 102 votes to get the majority. And then we're not doing fairy typing for this one. We're sticking with the Gen 3 stuff. And Deoxys and Cast form, alternate forms don't get extra votes. It's just one vote per Pokemon. So we're going to consider Pokemon types, Pokemon abilities, but again, that's Gen 3 abilities, type weaknesses, and then finally we're going to get into Pokédex entries because we kind of need that at the end. So right off the bat, it is not looking good for Groudon. I gathered up the obvious fire types, Pokemon that had weaknesses to water. I even included grass Pokemon that had the chlorophyll ability, and I could see where you would argue that they would not want a drought. However, I tried to give as much as I could to Groudon, because you'll see it gets pretty desperate here. I also gave things like Flygon a vote for Groudon. It's got a really strong resistance to fire, and it's weak to ice, so I assumed that it would be cool with more fire Pokemon being superior. But as you'll see here, we're going to flip over to Kyogre's votes, because it becomes pretty clear that Groudon is not going to get 102 Pokemon supporting its cause. So for Kyogre, the main takeaway that you need to have is there are a lot of water Pokemon, and when you combine that with bug and grass Pokemon along with steel, you end up with a lot of Kyogre supporters. I also threw Lunatone in there because I felt like Lunatone would have to vote for a scenario where it's dark out instead of there being a lot of sunlight. And I put the ice Pokemon in there too, because I assumed they wouldn't want to have their fire weakness exposed. It pretty quickly became clear to me that there was going to be a lot more water and drizzle supporters than there were going to be drought and fire supporters. So I felt like Cast Form would probably end up going for the water side so that it would have a type resistance to most of the other Pokemon. But then there was also my thoughts about Thunder and how that would be 100% accuracy in the drizzle, so then maybe it'd be super effective, against Cast Form. So I wasn't really sure where to put Cast Form. I went with Team Kyogre, but let me know if you disagree with that. Next up, we have 9 more votes for Kyogre. These are all electric types, and I kind of had two schools of thought here. First of all, if they do learn Thunder or have that move, it's going to be 100% accurate. And then also, I think an electric type would want to live in a world where there's a lot of water flying Pokemon that they have super effective advantages on, and they would not want the ground type Pokemon or the rock type Pokemon to be around. So I think they would also vote for Kyogre. This is our last group of votes, and these are also votes for Kyogre. There are a number of Pokemon that enjoy the darkness. So Zubat, Golbat, Crobat, Sableye, Wynaut, Wobbuffet, Duskull, Dusclops, Shuppet, Banette. They all have Pokédex entries from Gen 3 where they mention that they like to dwell in darkness or they specifically avoid the sunlight. So I assume that they would prefer the cloudy weather as opposed to the harsh sunlight. Grimer and Muck are also kind of these like toxic beings that live in water, so again, I think they would support drizzle and rain. Lileep and Cradily were both fossil Pokemon, and whatever it is, like a million Pokemon years ago, they used to live in the ocean. And then Swablu and Altaria are actually clouds. And their Pokedex entries mention them like flying around and pretending to be clouds, which I feel like would be easier to do if there was a bunch of rain clouds. So that's it. That gives Kyogre a solid majority of votes. Even if you disagree with a few of my choices, Kyogre would still have the clear majority. So between Groudon and Kyogre in a democratic vote, I think the Hoenn region's Pokemon would support Kyogre over Groudon.